Welcome everyone this morning for another fantastic Small Business Week virtual session. We have a great panel set up before us. Just a couple of quick welcoming notes. Please remain muted as you are during this presentation as we are recording. So this information will be available later for y'all to view, hopefully on our website. You'll notice that the chat feature is also disabled. So if you have any questions for our panelists, feel free to look at or utilize the question and answer feature that is located in your bottom panel of the screen. You'll be able to ask questions there, and we will have a 15-minute session of question and answers where we will go through and address those at the end of the panel. And at this time, I will hand things over to Christine Mcguire.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to attend this, what we know will be an exciting and very interesting webinar about the face of retail, particularly in kind of Austin projects that are kind of marquee, that are mixed use, such as the Mueller redevelopment and the 2nd Street and Seaholm district area. I am the division manager over the redevelopment division in the City of Austin Economic Development Department. And we work with all these wonderful people who are my panelists here with us, and they are the true experts on retail and real estate as our partners, and are our partners in helping us tenant and have really vibrant retail places in projects that the city has co-partnered with the private sector developers. And over the last 20 years, the city is probably one of the largest landowners next to the state of Texas and probably Austin Independent School District. And there are properties over time that we no longer have use. And I think the Seaholm power plant is a perfect example, as well as the old Robert Mueller Airport and a number of properties that were up and down between San Antonio and Colorado Street that now is a location of our city hall and other key marquee uses. Those areas were, well, one was an airport, the other one was a power plant, and some were pole yards, one was a warehouse, one was like something looking like City Hall, which was actually a warehouse kind of looking structure. Anyway, over time, as our communities evolved, the cities had to evolve too. And what we have done is properties that we have decommissioned or no longer are using or are redeveloping, we enter into partnerships with private developer experts and bring new life into those. And many of our projects have retail. I think over the last 20 years on city partnered projects with the private sector, we have over 1 million square feet of retail on the ground, and that's not including other commercial and office. We really want to focus on a couple projects that we've been working with these amazing people on our panel, and like to talk a little bit about and introduce and have these other wonderful people introduce themselves as well. I want to talk about the 2nd Street District and Robert Mueller, the redevelopment of the 700-acre airport, as well as the 2nd Street Retail District, which is really a 6-block assemblage that is the home of City Hall and a number of wonderful anchors, such as Austin City Limits and the W Hotel. Lots of great retail in this area between San Antonio and Colorado. Eric Desjarnette is a senior vice president of CBRE Richard Ellis. He actually is a broker that is actually a broker of much of that space in partnership with Amley. City isn't an expert in retail, so we've outsourced that expertise to folks like CBRE, as well as Sergio Negrete, who actually represents Catellus Development Corporation. Catellus is the master developer of the 700-acre development, and he actually represents Catellis' space and actually getting occupants for the retail space in Miller. And all roads lead to the banker. Shirley Sheffield is Vice President Commercial Loan Officer with Amplify Credit Union. And she does soup to nuts in terms of working either with small businesses for their own business growth or even commercial lending as well for bricks and mortar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let each of the panelists provide a little bit of background on themselves and how they interface a little bit with the commercial retail space, not just with our projects, but with projects in general. But I want to let everybody here who's attending know they have really deep expertise in the Austin market and the Austin commercial retail market. Pre-COVID, and we are also going to talk about the world of post-COVID world. So I'm going to turn over to Shirley, and then we'll go to Sergio, and then we'll go to Eric, and have them talk a little bit about themselves, where they fit in this, what I would say it's a symphony orchestra, and actually having businesses fill our tenant space and really making these vibrant commercial districts. Shirley?
Well, thank you, Christine. I just want to remind everyone I am a banker, so that means you come at this with a certain point of view, and that is conservative. After all, I did predict 8 of the last 4 recessions, and so we do have to keep that in mind. But I have grown up in Austin and got here in the 60s and have been around and seen tremendous amount of change, some of which Christine just described about how the warehouse district has changed from being warehouses to becoming much more retail oriented. And I remember when it was warehouses. And I do work with borrowers, whether it is the landlord or the tenant. And I have worked with established businesses who are expanding or replacing their rents and moving into their own facility. Or I have worked with the tenant who is finally getting their own place of business and has perhaps worked for years with somebody else. And now they are starting their own business and help them determine the right mix of contingency, tenant improvement expenses, and leasehold expenses and equipment, that sort of thing, and help them put together their business plan for success moving forward. So
I'll chime in here. My name is Sergio Negrete with Catellis, and I actually oversee a lot of our commercial retail portfolio at Miller, primarily the retail street, Aldridge Street district that kind of bookends by Miller Lake Park, where the roundabout is at Aldridge Street, all the way to kind of, I'd say, terminates the street, if you will, at Branch Park, where there's a pavilion being built right now where Kirby Lane is positioned within the Miller Town Center. So I have the privilege of getting to work on that every day, as well as all the fun things that are going on at Miller and some of our other projects around Austin. Before I was at Catellis, I was actually on the brokerage side of it. So I've been working on Miller for about 9 years now and leasing a lot of the buildings for Catellis when the HEB district was built out there and some of the regional retail. And oddly enough, Eric and I used to be partners back at CBRE, and I used to work on 2nd Street district. So I'm very familiar with the lay of the land of the local retail market and how it's really evolved over the past 10 years. It's drastically changed, and what these markets are now versus what they were 10 years ago, in downtown as well, I think is something that's pretty fascinating to experience as our city continues to grow. So happy to be here and kind of learn some more insight and experience and good conversation here about local business. So I'll turn it over to Eric.
Good morning, thank you. My name is Eric Desjarnette, and I'm with CBRE. Before I was with CB, I was with Trammell Crow, and so have a little bit of that development side experience too. and still dabble in both the retail and the attached mixed use, so to speak. And one of the things about the districts we're talking about, they're really multi-use environments, which makes them interesting. And the city has been a big proponent in that. And I'll give them some more kudos than just really what you think of kind of the Second Street with Amley is about 6 blocks, including City Hall. But where my office is on Second Street is in the old Greenwater treatment plant. And I was in the building yesterday, and we were looking out the window with some people in from out of town, and explaining to them like, no, this was a water treatment plant, not that long ago, and now you've got towers with Google and the hotel proper, and North Shore, but still buried in that, we've got ATX Casino, which is a local restaurant, and we've got a salon that's local, and we've got Torchy's Tacos that's local. And it's really important, I think, to the landlords. I know it is to the city, and they've got some requirements in Second Street and in Mueller to have a certain amount of local credit, but and in users. But the good news is that the landlords, at least most of them, they understand and appreciate that a mix of local with some regional or national is really the best mix. And in Austin in particular, we love our local tenants, and our local tenants a lot of times are some of the strongest tenants because they understand the market in a way that other people don't. So I must say retail is something I enjoy. It's a bit of a passion, and it's fun to work with people of kind of all, whether they're coming in from out of town or they're local. It's really sort of the glue that holds together these districts. People talk about placemaking, but it really, there's something to it, and the sum of the parts is greater if it's all done and stitched together in the right way. So I'll hand it back to you, Christine.
I absolutely love, Eric, how you hit the nail on the head about local retail's importance in our developments. And we've had goals of 30% as aspirational goals. And our partners have hit that out of the park in terms of achieving that. And I think, Eric, you really began to talk about not just why it's important for the city, because we want to support our local retail through panels like this, through all of our small business programs, but even in our retail. But how does it bring foot traffic? Why is it so important to the bottom line of the whole district and to the overall tenant mix of a district? And you began to really hit on that. But I want to open that up to what y'all are seeing for others about how important it is to have local retailers, but also is there, a type of local retailer, and that type might be a level in their growth, because it might not be perfect for all types of retail in different stages of their growth, but there might be a sweet spot that y'all are looking for in our deals, or maybe just in tenanting in general in Austin. So I'm going to open that up, and I love Eric, if you had any more to opine, but I also want to on that, but also hear from Sergio as well as Shirley with her broader lending context.
I think that was an intro.
Sergio, I'm going to point to you, or you. I'm going to point to
let me start, but I won't talk too long, I promise. So part of your question that I heard was, what are the landlords looking for and what's the mix? And then you also made a comment about at what stage is a tenant ready to go into a project like this? Because these are typically longer term commitments. You're in either an urban environment or in, really, Catellus is really now somewhat of an urban environment too. And it's not cheap, in all honesty. When you go into a new space like this, it's a long-term commitment. The landlord's gonna, look, believe it or not, the landlord does not want the tenant to fail. It may not seem that way all the time, but it's really not good for the landlord, for the tenant to fail. So everybody really has, alignment of interest here in success for tenants. And often you may drive by and go, oh my God, that space is still empty. How could that space still be empty? They should just lease it. Well, you really want the right mix. You want the right mix for everybody to come together, and you want strong tenants that are going to make it. I know the city has a lot of resources. I don't know how deep we're going to go into that today, but the city has a lot of resources to help small business so that when they come to a landlord, they're prepared. And Shirley can talk about that a little bit more too. But I think that the sweet spot is wider than you might think for a local tenant. Now, in Second Street, because it's been there for a while, we've got some what they call second generation spaces, meaning there was a tenant in there before, the tenant's not there anymore. Obviously, with COVID, we're going to have some turnover. And we've been pretty open to the idea of what they call a pop-up, meaning a shorter term lease. So we're open to people exploring the idea. And I think you're going to see the market go more in this direction. And Sergio might talk about this some too, where instead of a tenant having to make a 10-year commitment or a 5-year commitment or spend literally hundreds of thousands of dollars doing finish out in a space, maybe they can do a 90 or 180 day, 3 to 6 month lease. Maybe they're already digitally native, as in they've already got a web platform. And this would be an experiment for them in a bricks and mortar, to test out their customer base. That would be on kind of the baby step end, I might say. But really going all the way through, like Torchy's Tacos, is expanding all over the country. They are a very sophisticated, they're really, almost like any other national tenant we would work with. But then there's this big wide spot in between of tenants that maybe this is their first location or maybe this is their second location. And I think those are the folks that, some counseling with the city maybe, or with their own CPA so that they've got a good business plan. Really helpful to walk in the door with a business plan if you're doing your first location or maybe your second. Talking to Shirley or talking to a banker, coming to the table. Ideally, when you come and look at space or you call a broker, whatever, you want to have your money and you want to have your plan. And a lot of times we see people think, oh, I need to go get the space first and then I'll get the money and figure out how I'm going to do it. You can generally understand what the market is and pro forma some rents, but it's going to all go a lot better if you've really got your money and your plan together when you come in. And one other comment, and there's so much we can talk about here, but why local? Austin's an unusual market. It's not Dallas, it's not Houston, it's not Chicago, and local people, especially successful local tenants. And success doesn't mean huge success. It may be you have 1,000 square feet somewhere and you have a really good clientele and they're loyal and you're ready to expand to 2,000 feet, say. The local tenants, the good ones, they understand their clientele. They're in communication with their clientele. We've had some tenants in particular down on 2nd Street, surprisingly, that throughout the pandemic, their sales have been fine. And it's just shocking to me, actually. But their sales have been fine because they know their clients, they know what they need, they know how to access them, they know how to stay in touch with them. And it's that loyalty and that foot traffic that Christine's talking about as far as why do we want them, what do they do for the district? Well, they bring in the other local people because they understand their client base, and that's super valuable to a landlord. Sergio?
I'll jump in and I'll try to piggyback off. And I think you covered a wide range of items that I would like to follow back up on. But I think the why local aspect is kind of interesting. It's, when we let off with Aldridge Street District, we knew that there was a demand for movie theater, right? And we went out and talked to every movie theater out there and ended up coming up with Alamo Drafthouse, who's in our own backyard. And that was intentional that we wanted them because in leasing these projects, we understand as, you know, local consumers ourselves of local retail, that customers, other tenants are going to gravitate towards an Alamo Draft House per se versus having, you know, a national movie theater chain that comes in. The way that the projects end up being merchandised over really the start of the project in the infancy all the way to, you know, you see a project in full build out, you know, 5 years later or whatever the build out time is. And you look at it and you compare what we have in Austin, you know, and what we have in the suburbs of Austin, and kind of look a little bit further out and how these projects get leased up from a merchandising standpoint. I think early on as landlords, we have to recognize and identify, what do you want your project to be, and how do you see that project to coming, you know, to fruition all the way to full build out. And for us at Mueller, it was, we wanted to build off the local, you know, tenants, right? And obviously we have the local requirements for, you know, in our master development agreement. And I think at this point, and don't quote me on it, but I think we're like 90% local businesses and a large majority of women owned as well. And so, you know, it's one of those things where you see you know, you may see some brands like an Orange Theory or a Bar 3 that someone thinks, wow, that's a national brand. But if you pull back the layers, the operators and the owners of those businesses are actually local owners and local, you know, business owners, right? They live in Austin, they've been in Austin for 15, 20 years. And while maybe it's a brand that's based out of a different state, it's still a local person behind it. And so I think sometimes that gets lost in translation of like what's local and what's not. I think some people get too hung up on, you know, some of the localness, but, you know, make sure you still support those local businesses that may be a chain, because somebody may have wanted to open up a franchise and they're still, you know, local to Austin. And so that's kind of first and foremost, just kind of an idea. And then second, Eric talked about the pop-ups, right? And we did a pilot project out at Mueller before we kicked off your second phases of this town center, where we actually did retail trailers instead of food trucks. They were retail trailers and shipping containers to activate the other side of the street until such time we were ready to break ground on the building. And so, you know, for us, we've contemplated doing some pop-up spaces because we understand that's where the market has trended. Alternatively, we've had so much activity out there, we're running out of space as to where do we do a pop-up space. So we kind of run into like, do we do a pop-up? Do we not do a pop-up space? But I think ultimately long term, you know, Second Street, the pop-ups that they've done are, you know, second generation spaces where somebody did go into it. So I think experimenting, you know, experimental retail, I think is something that's here to stay, and kind of people getting creative with these short-term leases and activating vacant spaces, right? I'm sure there's other projects, you know, we were fortunate not to lose really any tenants during COVID because we worked with them. But I think other projects, whether there were, you know, mixed use urban projects or more suburban, I think landlords are going to be more open to having pop-up tenants and explore that to see if it's something that works long term. So I think that's kind of a super unique aspect about retail and the evolution of retail and how that really plays out in the overall market as a whole. So anyways, I'll stop talking. I could go on for quite a while and on these various topics, and I'll turn it over to Shirley.
Okay. I think what people, when they're shopping or giving their time and spending their day doing an activity, they want it to be fun. And I think people seek authenticity, which your local retailers bring to any space they're located in. And so particularly if you're a tourist or a visitor, if there's a reason you're coming to Austin, and it's not so you can do what you can do at home, it is so you can experience Austin. And the only way to get that experience frequently is through the local business, whether it's the local restaurateur or the local retailer. And so I think as a restaurant or a retailer, you look for places that will attract people who are seeking that sort of experience. And it can be in the Second Street district, it can be in the area at Mueller. some ways the domain provides some of that, and even there's some new retail opportunities that are occurring further out in East Austin in the Springdale Road area. And it's attracting people who seek that experience. And I think the retailer should look for places that have quirkiness, and whether it's planned and somewhat contrived, there's nothing wrong with that. Or it can be something that happened like the downtown area where it was organic over a long period of time. But wherever you choose to put your business, you want it to be in a place that feels somewhat quirky versus a very antiseptic strip center. I would look for that. And as a banker, I'm always looking for proof of concept. And so Eric and Sergio have already talked about ways to prove your concept, whether it's a pop-up, food trailer. Some cases I've looked for prior experience in another business or managing a project in another business, or maybe it's a fair. I mean, there's different ways that you have had booths at fairs. I mean, there's different ways a business can show that, yes, there are people out there that truly want to spend their money on that product. And then, I also want my business owner to have skin in the game. I'm not the one to put them in the business. I'm the one to assist them in achieving their dreams, but they need to have the capacity to weather storms, and to also, though, minimize their debt service. And so by doing that, equity does minimize their debt service. And once they know their business is, that their plan works, that's when you can maybe expand. That's when perhaps the debt levels, you might be able to leverage the business a little bit more. But when it's a young business, you want to keep those debt levels manageable. So, and I think that's about all I have on this one.
I'd say I'll chime in on piggybacking off of what something Shirley said, which was, these different, she mentioned downtown, Domain, Miller, all of those projects are completely different from each other, right? Unique in itself, right? Downtown has been an evolution of business district, tourism, and it's evolved as construction has continued over the past 10 years. Miller is really a neighborhood community that is, family friendly. You've got young professionals that are living in the apartments. And then you have the Domain, and Domain's this big monstrosity of a shopping mall, outdoor shopping mall. That's kind of this live, work, play environment to a different degree. And some advice I would give to local tenants would be know your market, right? And understand the neighborhood that you are going into, because, we've had people that come to us and, that we've seen come and go that, think something's going to work in a certain, space, and they have it in their head that they're going to execute it one way. And maybe they just didn't know the market, right? And sometimes you have to recognize that as a landlord going into it. And sometimes it's hard to, right? Shirley says, you got a proof of concept, and you get a really good group of people that have a really good reputation behind them and have wow, this is a great concept. It's been proven before. And then you kind of miss the mark, right? Or there's certain things in place that didn't quite fall into place for them. So I would say that's equally as important in all of this is know your audience, and your market and who you're selling to in these different projects that you're going into, because they're different all across the board.
I would think during COVID, that has been so important. And Eric, you were saying that there were some, don't want to misquote you, but there were some businesses that were able to maintain their client base. And to Shirley and Sergio's point, it's not just know your market, but have a loyal follow, already have a book of business. Getting into long-term debt or long-term commitments really requires being able to show that you are going to sustain and be sustainable. And then whap, you get something like COVID. Who'd have thunk it, right? So talk maybe a little bit, all of y'all would have something to bring about how have you seen company, businesses, retailers, whether they're in a pop-up space or have been a long-term tenant, or surely you've probably been counseling all sorts of folks along the continuum. what are the keys to pivoting during COVID? And this virus is going to be around for a long time, even though people are getting vaccines. So I don't want to say a post-COVID world, but I will say, you know, maybe the market has changed substantially permanently. So I do want to just talk about COVID and how important it is in keeping your customers coming to you. Eric, why don't I just throw it over to you? What, for those tenants that have been able to really not see a blip, what have they done or what haven't they done?
Well, I think, you know, there have been a lot of things that have happened for all of us. One, the fact we're having a video conference right now. You know, we've all shifted in our own way. And I think, you know, Christine, that's the really interesting and unknown right now is sort of like everything's changed. Like overnight, we all had to change. There was no option in changing. And the thing that I'm going to say that I think we all know is those brands and those businesses that already had a digital format, that already had some way of working through their supply chains or whatever it is that they need to do, or if they're a restaurant, you know, which I know has been really hard on the food and beverage business, but have been able to shift. And I mean, what I'm hearing like really kind of recently in the past couple of weeks directly from some restaurant owners is actually their numbers are back. There are a lot of people that are back to 2019 numbers, but it looks different. You know, it's takeout, it's a big patio, it's extended hours. I had one restaurateur say to me, you know, Eric, I feel a little guilty, but our sales are pretty good. And I'm seeing people make reservations at hours they never would have made reservations for before. You know, they'll come in for dinner on a Saturday at 4:30, or they'll, you know, have a lunch at 2 o'clock where, you know, usually, yeah, that people didn't do that. And so I think it's going to be really, the next 6 months are going to be kind of fascinating because we're going to continue to kind of shift and morph. And I'm with you, Christine. I was with some people earlier today that are from New York City because now our little town is not so little and people from all over come here all the time. And, you know, I think New York is going to fully open this, like in July, like fully open bars, restaurants, entertainment, which is kind of shocking to think about now. And they commented that they were out to dinner last night and they were like, wow, it feels like Austin has really pretty much reopened. But I'm with you, Christine. I think it's going to be kind of did we go too far and you got to pull back and, you know, we're going to have to moderate. So a lot of the things that we've adapted to, whether it's mask or just social distancing or a number of people in a store or, you know, hand sanitizers, you know, I don't think a lot of that is going away. It's probably going to continue to evolve. But the bottom line of all this is, can you still have sales? Can you still do business and transact without people physically coming into your store in the same way they always did? And I think that's going to be kind of a decider for us. And I think that's been a little bit of the winners and losers here. And really not even, some of it is just blind luck of categories. Just some categories it was easier for them to do than others. But you know, we're all going to have to adapt. Yeah, just one other quick comment. I think you'll see in general in retail, and you're already seeing this is not new news, you may not need as many bricks and mortar locations. You know, that you need the strong platform in the background. That's not food and beverage. This would be more for, you know, retail. And then obviously services. Services are very strong in the retail environment. And I think services will stay really strong. And you really have to have bricks and mortars for that sort of use too. But traditional retail, buying a lamp or a pair of pants or something, you're probably going to see fewer stores and a stronger backbone of supply chain for online purchases. I'll leave it there.
Eric, you covered it all. I don't know if we have anything in that. I'm kidding. Yeah, I think the restaurants adapting, you know, takeout curbside has been huge, right? And like, what do? You know, I know that a number of restaurants participated and got grants to feed the homeless or send meals to AISD schools. And so I think more than just the consumer, but I think the city, and the school district recognize what do we need to do to keep, restaurants and employee staff, right? And, for a restaurant to turn off the lights for 6 months and say we're coming back is really hard from a staffing perspective. And, getting these restaurants and staff up and trained, and, you got a whole menu that you've got to cook and you've got to teach new staff. I mean, that's really, really tough. And so I think like Eric said, there's, kind of winners and losers, and not losers in a bad way to an extent, but just the people that have done well have been the ones that have been trying to grasp at every resource available to them that the city has to provide, or ways to pivot your business to an online ordering system, right? A lot of businesses didn't have online ordering when the pandemic hit, right? And they're like, their phone lines are busy, and they're like, we have to completely reset. And some of them shut down for a week and said, we need to get our platforms to be able to reset to serve in a different way. One interesting thing, I kind of like the health and fitness standpoint, what we're starting to see is outdoor classes, which I think is kind of a pretty unique thing. So I think it's kind of going back to beyond your four walls, right? Not even from a retail standpoint, but how do you go beyond your four walls for whatever you're doing to drive business to your, to your actual, physical business and sales and bottom line. And then from, like Eric mentioned, services, services are really strong right now. And I think that what a lot of people realized over the past year is, you can't forget about taking care of yourself, and I think a lot of people, whether it's getting your massage done, or, oddly enough, there's a lot of people getting their eyelashes done, because they're on Zoom calls. Not me, but I know that there's, there's services are out there because your appearance and how you look on camera has been important to some people. And so it's kind of interesting to see the personal services side of the business really take off. And even through the pandemic, where people are still going and get massages, it looks different, right? But I think adapting is kind of the word of 2020, if you will, for business owners, is how do you adapt? How do you pivot? And I think 2021 is how do you take what you've built upon that foundation, and when business comes back, how can you still serve all of these channels that you've created for your business, and it looks different, right, with social distancing and certain things. So I think from a operational standpoint and back of house, it may look different, right? So those are just some couple observations that I've seen in tenants, and how we help tenants promote what they're doing. And and that's part of it, is as a landlord, is like, how do you help tenants promote what they're doing that's new and different, right? And be able to provide that as a service as well. So
I don't have too much to add, but I've thought about the advice I always give businesses, almost any type of business, to help them be ready for recessions, this is a COVID caused recession, but it was a recession, is to have multiple income streams. And so that if you're a restaurant, maybe it is some public service sales that you may sell to hospitals, schools, homeless. If you are a real estate agent, it may still be always keeping your finger on managing properties, which is usually the least glamorous, but it's a nice steady source of income. If you are, and just always have these multiple revenue streams, so that if one goes down, your whole business is not taken down. And then also, I know we always care about our employees, but my customer is the business owner, and I've had to remind them sometimes, is that your employees will still lose their jobs if you cannot survive your business. And so, I mean, if your business cannot survive. And so do what it takes to survive this recession. And so if that means you've got to cut back hours and reduce your lunchtime service and concentrate more in the evening, then you do what you need to do, in the hopes that your business makes it over to the other side and can rehire people. And yes, it is expensive. Nobody wants to have to think about that. But over the years, and this is not the first recession I've seen, and I do hope it's the last, but I know it probably isn't. The survival of the business is key. And so those two things kind of help telling people to step back, put your business person's hat on, and make the tough decisions. So.
Shirley, I want to continue on that a little bit longer on that line with you, because you do a lot, you see a lot of balance sheets. You have a lot of business owners come in and you give them advice. Some of them might already have been in either a experimental space, or maybe in their home, or maybe they've had a first generation space or something. They're thinking about approaching bricks and mortar, or thinking now about bricks and mortar at their growth plan. Will COVID or this recession or any recession help you look at their balance sheet and their analysis a little differently, in a sense of being more resilient, or already coming to the table before they begin to talk with a broker or talking with an Eric or a Sergio about looking at one of these spaces? Is your advice going to stay the same, or are you looking for different or other things now?
Well, if it's a restaurant, the fine dining is a little tougher to sell right now, where people are spending 2 to 3 hours inside. And currently we're not really financing something like that, but we are looking for patio space, drive-through, faster casual. That is easier for us to do. And then we're also, in many ways, I feel that these businesses that are here now, and if they're reasonably liquid, have been reasonably profitable, they've weathered the storm. I feel, I think, it may be contingent on variance, but I think if the company has gone through everything they've gone through and they're still making it, that's a sign of management quality and good planning, understanding their customers, and being able to be fast on their feet. It's pretty impressive. If they've all, I feel like then I can kind of, they're the experts. They don't necessarily even need much of my advice because they've proven it. So, but as far as liquidity, I like them to have, they do their projections, which at this point I'll probably trust pretty highly. I may stress it, but I'm going to trust their ability to know what they think they're going to earn and how they're going to market. But I'd like them to be able to have probably 6 months to 12 months liquidity to manage any issues. And then their projections need to be reasonable. So I can look at what they've done historically. I can look at how they grew historically, and look at their most recent issues and feel like, okay, this makes sense. They're not planning on tripling revenues in 2 months or something. It just has to look reasonable. So, and they have to look like they can handle it. And maybe they've got another source of income. That makes it easier. Or maybe they've got, liquidity or assets they could sell if worst case scenario.
I'm going to say that just slightly less eloquently than Shirley did. I think one of the wake ups for a lot of, I work on a couple of boards, and one's a nonprofit. It's like everybody got hit, so I think one of the things that was a wake up call for most businesses, this is everything from a medical practice to, a retailer, to the company I work for, which is a huge multinational, organization. Shirley's comment about having 6 to 12 months of basically liquidity. I think this one board I've been involved in, we had 3 months, and we thought, well, 3 months of cash on hand was pretty good. I think after COVID, I think, the idea that the people that have survived and thrived for the most part either had cash, I'm going to call it, instead of liquidity, I'm just going to call it cash, that you've got money in the bank to kind of weather through. Now, this is maybe a hard thing to say right now, because I know it's been a lot of stress for people, but we're going to get to the other side of this, and it's just something to remember long term, especially in a city like Austin, which at times just seems so frothy and vibrant. It's like, how could it ever end? You know, you need to have some money in the bank. That whole rainy day fund may look more like a COVID fund now, but having liquidity, cash is extremely important for businesses of all types.
Sergio, thank you. That is very helpful. And it's almost like, even from an individual standpoint, we're always told to have some cash in the bank to do that. But I appreciate that. I do want to ask Matt, the man behind the curtain here, to see, we're at 15 minutes too. We've hit the 15-minute mark and have no questions. So if there are any folks here who do have questions, please feel free to ask. But so please feel free to ask them. And, we are happy to do a Q&A back and forth. Very happy to do that. So we have reserved a little bit of time. But until we get some brave soul to ask us a question, I want to talk about the future a little bit. So I hear, and it's really good to hear from, and I have yet, honestly, I have been sheltering in place in my house, and I'm a deep introvert. It'll take a backhoe to get me out, but I know that having people like myself, with City of Austin employee in City Hall, will help all the retailers. So yes, y'all want me back, and I'm happy to go spend my money. So, but I will say, let's talk about the future. And I do know that the virus still has some say in this, but we hear regularly about the incredible price of homes, and that Austin is, I guess, now the 12th largest city in the country. We are now over 1 million in population. We're an international city. A lot of our economy is really diversified. So talk to me about kind of the future, about how can we, or how can retailers or folks here on this call who are interested, really best position themselves for this, what I'm hopeful is a growth phase, or a next opportunity, when people are coming back, when people are getting their vaccines and out shopping and wanting to get back to normal. How can retailers really better position themselves for this next cycle?
Sergio, since you are the future, I think you should start.
It's an interesting question. It's a good question, and I feel as though, as a landlord or someone who oversees retail space, it's somewhat of a difficult question to answer, because I'm not the business owner, right? And I haven't experienced that over the past 15 months. And so I think, a business owner, I think, would answer a different question than I would. But I think kind of my observation of working with a lot of business owners from ownership standpoint is that there's a lot of things that you've kind of had to experience over the past 15 months, kind of trial and error, right? And a lot of those things, some things probably didn't work, right? Some things probably worked, like Eric said, expanding your business hours, right? And I think going forward for business owners, I think kind of a thing that I do as well is, look to your peers as well, and look to the businesses that you look up to, look at what other people are doing. And I think there's some very strong leaders out there in the small business community in Austin that are doing it right. And I think if you're a new business, either trying to get into it, or if you're a struggling business, or if you're a business that you're 1-2 locations and you're thinking, man, I came out of this and I've got PPP money, we've made it through, we've got our rainy day fund, we've got all these things, and we've made it through, and we know that as a business and as a brand, we want to expand. Go talk to Eric and Shirley, and then come leave some space from us. But I think everybody is, you're at different walks of life as business owners, and I think you've got to look beyond, your four walls. And when we do stuff, we always look for best practices and how other people have done it, right? Whether it's in Austin, whether it's in across the US or across the world. And I think looking at other businesses and how they position themselves to then position yourself for growth or for whatever you are looking to position yourself for in 2021 and beyond. I think it's always good looking beyond what you've created and learning from other people. And I think that's some advice that I would give to business owners that may be listening to this and figuring out what's my next step and what do you do. I think that's good advice, because I think kind of, a lot of people probably can get stuck in their own head of like, what do I do and how do I internalize this and how do I pivot, or my franchisor is telling me this, but the end all be all, there's a lot of people out there that have really good ideas, and I think you've got to kind of shoot ideas and kind of figure it out as you roll and kind of want to, grow a business or start a business. So that's my advice.
That's great. I do have folks who are asking questions, so that is great. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, Sergio, but I want to get to these questions. We've got 3 right now. One is specifically directed to you, Shirley. What is a reasonable interest rate and payment schedule on a business loan?
What's my collateral? I mean, that's one of the things, because I don't want my loan to last longer than the collateral. But generally, let's assume it's equipment and leasehold improvements, perhaps. One, I'd probably prefer to do that as an SBA loan, so that I've got a guarantee in place to help cover some of the risk, because essentially a leasehold improvements, that's worth nothing in the end. You've helped your landlord, which I love landlords, but still that's you've helped them. So if it's an SBA loan, you're probably looking at about 6% for that type of a loan. And with SBA, you can get an extended time frame. Maximum would be 10 years. If it's easy for the company to afford a shorter time frame, you always want to keep within the life of the asset. So whatever's earning that income for you, you'd like to keep your repayment within that life. So if the equipment has an 8-year life, you probably would do better having a 5 or 6 year note, so that you're building some equity. So it's always, again, about having some, reducing some of the leverage. If you're not an SBA loan, let's say you're just borrowing against your equipment, and it's still you're still probably in the 7s to 8%, assuming it doesn't have any real estate. And the best way to get a lower rate is to have the real estate. And in that case, you're probably looking, depending on the industry, 4.25%, 5%. And of course, with real estate's involved, you're looking at 25-year amortizations. But we're not going to keep our rate fixed that long, though. We'd want to be able to adjust it periodically, maybe every 5 years if it's real estate.
Thank you, Shirley. This is directed to I think Eric and Sergio here. Are there some specific types of businesses that you are looking for right now in filling the vacant space at downtown or at Mueller? And what would be a win for you for those respective developments?
That is a great question. And I think our answers are going to look different between what Eric's looking for and what we are looking for. At the end of the day, I think right now it's, what we've seen and that's come to us really, and from a market standpoint right now, there's a lot of services. There's a lot of medical out there, whether it's, Miller's a fairly large family-friendly community that has children. We're seeing orthodontists. We're seeing primary medical facilities now more than ever. We're seeing optical, right? People still need to get their eyes checked and still need to do, and these are categories that we may not have right now at Miller, right? We're seeing a med spa. We're seeing these personal services. And then we're seeing a big influx of food and beverage users right now that I think naturally a big win for that our respective developments right now is some really good, strong local food users is what we're pursuing and at this point, because as Shirley said, we want that authenticity of our project and somebody who's coming from out of town or in Austin, they want to come to something that's authentic. So that would be a big win for the Mueller development if we could get some more local restaurants adding on to the lineup of fantastic restaurants that we already have.
Yeah, and I'll draft off of that. It's been interesting to watch because you can kind of see it sitting in our seat. You have incoming calls and inquiries, and they come in waves, and we're seeing the exact same thing now, where I think downtown got hit harder, really almost than anywhere, because the offices emptied out and the hotels empty out. Whereas in Mueller and even out of the Domain, you have the neighborhood still around you, to help support your businesses. Excuse me. But we've got food and beverages come back strong. We have more demand than we have space for right now. Services is another one, has come back really strong. And the way the agreement with the city is for us, we really want to try and keep Second Street, as much kind of retailish as we can. And at the same time, the neighborhood has changed to where it's really an urban neighborhood now. People really do live there, and they have dogs, and we have, we could use a space for a vet, believe it or not. And, like dog food, there's a dog at Seaholm has, a dog or a pet food store. But really a win, believe it or not, would be a couple of 3 really good local soft good retailers, clothes, or just some other fashion or furniture or lighting, whatever it is, home. But that's where it's been, excuse me, more difficult. I think that wave's coming, and it's already come. Like South Congress is really where the bigger groups have gone, the well-capitalized have come in. We don't necessarily need Hermes, on Second Street, which has opened or is going to open down on South Congress, which is kind of hard to believe. But, just some really good, solid, the boutique or the jewelry store or the home store. Those are the sort of things that have been a little harder for us to find in this environment.
And one last question. I know we just have a few minutes left, but just when you say the phone rings, let's say that a small business owner is interested in identifying space. What would you recommend any of you here on the panel for them to do? Should they find a broker to look for them, or how would they go about finding the space that's best for them?
I would highly recommend hiring a commercial broker. And I think it's, there's some business owners that have done this 10 times over that know how to negotiate and can do it for themselves. If you're a new business, 1-2 location, you're looking to expand, I would highly recommend hiring a specific retail broker, because there's so many levels of brokerage within, commercial real estate that are office, industrial, multifamily. And there's some people try to do a lot of things. And I think retail is so unique in how leases and term sheets get negotiated that you need somebody looking out for your best interest. Because at the end of the day, I work for the ownership side of it, so I'd be happy to negotiate with someone directly. But even people that show up to us unbrokered, I try to at least point them in the right direction, because somebody that comes and shows up that wants to lease space that doesn't have any comments to a term sheet or to release is a red flag for me. And we need to, I want them to know that their interest is protected and that they don't feel as though somebody took advantage of them, right? And so I would highly recommend doing that when you're looking for space, and building more than that, you build a team of advisors, your little advisory board. You need a banker, you need an architect, you need a contractor. And I think putting this team together is super important in what you do to expand your business as a local business owner.
And have an attorney read your lease.
Yes. Very important. Have an attorney read your lease. Because if you just sign the lease, it's good for us, but at the end of the day, you need to make sure that your interest is protected.
I do believe we are out of time. And I do want to thank, unless there's any last comments, I really want to thank Shirley Sheffield, Sergio Negrete, Eric Desjarnette for being on our panel. And Matt, I know that we have I want to just give thanks to Matt Schmidt, who has been this wonderful person behind the scenes here. And I would like to kind of put it to the very last slide. Visit smallbizaustin.org to find a whole lot more resources about what the city of Austin can offer for you, and how we can help grow and stabilize your business to help you on your growth path, whether you become a future tenant in one of our spaces or somewhere else. We certainly want to help all small businesses thrive, not just survive. So with that, Matt, are there any final closing questions, or I'm sorry, comments or needs for people here to know?
No, thank you very much for attending. Thank you to our panelists for leading a great discussion. Thank you, Christine, for moderating. Again, if you have any other questions or are looking for other resources, please visit our small business development team with our smallbizaustin.org. There is a host of resources that are offered through the city. And then we also have some lists of third-party resources that we have worked through that could benefit your business, along with additional classes and events or trainings that are available year-round. We just definitely encourage you to visit smallbizaustin.org. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.